Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to this year's program hosted by Senator David Mitt and Orange County Human Relations. We will begin shortly as folks keep coming in. So sit back and we will begin shortly.
Thank you so much, Gagandeep, for that kicking that off, and thank you for your team at OC Human Relations for your partnership in this endeavor. My name is Dave Min. I represent California's 37th Senate District, right here in the heart of Orange County. It includes my home city of Irvine, as well as Costa Mesa, Tustin, Newport Beach, about half of Huntington Beach, Laguna Beach, Lake Forest, Laguna Woods, the city of Orange, where I just spent most of my morning, as well as Villa Park, Anaheim Hills, and some others. And the theme for today's discussion, Finding Common Ground, is one that I think is very salient today, particularly given what's happening right now in Orange County and across this country. And it's my intention that what we are doing today will be the first in an ongoing series of interfaith discussions featuring representatives from different faiths. And we're blessed here in Orange County and in this district with a wide diversity of different faith communities. We obviously have a diverse population of people, and these communities are rich with culture. They add to our culture. We have at least 108 languages spoken here, and our constituents represent cultures from across the world. Whether we're talking about the Global Village Festival or the Orange International Street Fair or the annual Tet Festival in Costa Mesa, we know here in this part of Orange County that we have a broad diversity that is just so amazing, and I think really does add to the cultural fabric of our community. With such a diverse set of peoples, it's easy to see the differences between us, and yet I think too often we fail to see the similarities. And what my office is hoping to do is to help our communities find common ground, because I think the common ground between our communities, including our faith communities, is part of what makes Orange County such a great place to live, to work, to visit, to call home. And I think interfaith dialogue in this time where we see so much intentional propagation of hate and division, that interfaith dialogue is important, because I think at our heart, all of our different faith communities share so many values, so many of the same goals. And I think interfaith dialogue creates greater understanding, collaboration, and partnership that can help bind us together against those that would seek to divide us. Now, in a time like this, we see many people turn to faith and their faiths for guidance, support, and also for hope. And we just came out of a year-plus long pandemic. We're coming out of that. And I think a lot of folks were wondering about their meaning in their lives. And I know many people turn to their faith communities. By coming together as we're doing today, we can find that common ground that connects us, and we can help move our communities towards a more positive, inclusive, and hopeful future. Now, I think when we come out of this era, when we look back on COVID-19 and some of what we've seen over the last few years, we may kind of note this era of history as one that is unique in our times. And I'm hopeful that will be a footnote around division and hatred that subsided, that we were able to conquer. But if we don't continue to engage in that interfaith dialogue, this could be the beginning of something that is more fractured and divisive. We've seen this happen in other countries, in other times. We've seen democratic processes and strong systems get upended by those who, again, would seek to propagate hate and division. And this can often lead to violent extremism, to polarization along religious, ethnic, or other lines that ends up ravaging communities. And so I think this is of deep concern right now. And we've seen whether it was attacks on the Muslims, whether it's anti-Semitic attacks on Asian Americans, African Americans, LGBT community members, or others, we have seen a lot of hate in Orange County in recent months and years. And so I think it's really, really important that those of us who believe in values of inclusivity and love and peace speak out and denounce the type of hatred that we're seeing, particularly as exacerbated by the pandemic. So my hope is that we have a productive conversation today, one that continues a dialogue that I think is really important to have. But I want to go and introduce our panelists for today's event. We are very blessed to have just a great group of people here today. And I want to start in no particular order, but with Rabbi Richard Steinberg, who is part of the Shir Amalot Temple. And he was chosen to lead this congregation of Shir Amalot, my apologies, in 2001. At that time, the congregation consisted of only 300 member families. Today, it's doubled its size, and it has well over 600 families in its congregation. Rabbi Steinberg is a community leader in the Orange County Jewish and general communities. He serves on the boards of the Jewish Federation, the American Jewish Congress, and the Anti-Defamation League, and is an officer on the Orange County Board of Rabbis. Our second panelist, Ezra Noir, is he's a Muslim representative at Chapman University. He's the head of library development and marketing and chair of the arts exhibits, where he curates exhibits including Empowering Muslim Women, Egypt, The Revolution Continues, and A Country Called Syria. Ezra holds an MBA from the American Management and Business Administration Institute, a Master of Arts in Organizational Leadership from Brandman University, and a Master of Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. Reverend Ralph Williamson from CORE AME, Pastor Ralph serves as a pastor of Christ Our Redeemer AME Church and is president and CEO of the CORE Community Development Corporation, which is CORE's nonprofit economic development arm, serving the disenfranchised and underprivileged. He's the sixth pastor for CORE AME, coming to us in 2019 after serving faithfully for 16 years at First AME Church in Las Vegas. Our next panelist is Reverend Karen Stoyanov, who's part of the Universalist Unitarian community. She serves on the board of directors at the OC Interfaith Network and is an active member of CLU, the Clergy and Laity United for Economic Justice. She's also Minister Emeritus at Orange County Unitarian Church in Costa Mesa. Our next panelist after that is Dr. Reverend Sarah Halverson-Cano, who's the newly called senior pastor at Irvine United Congregational Church. Prior to serving at IUCC, you may have seen her involved with Fairview Community Church, a congregation of both the American Baptist churches and the United Church of Christ, which she led for over 14 years. With a strong ministry of social justice, Reverend Halverson-Cano works on a range of issues affecting Orange County, from immigration, low-wage workers, to LGBT equality. She received her BA at Chapman University, worked on a PhD in the New Testament at Claremont Graduate University before choosing to go to seminary for her Master's of Divinity at the Claremont School of Theology. Dr. Jasjit Singh, Jeeth Singh is a pediatric infectious diseases subspecialist who currently serves as a clinical professor of pediatrics at UC Irvine and also as the medical epidemiologist for CHOC Children's Hospital in Orange, California. She's here with us today to represent the Sikh Coalition of Orange County, and she serves on the boards of Orange County Interfaith Network and Interfaith Youth Council of Orange County. Dr. Ding Jo Curry, PhD, is coming to us to represent the Baha'i Faith. She's been a member of the Baha'i Faith for over 40 years and currently serves as a member of the local spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Huntington Beach. Dr. Curry is the former chancellor of Coast Community College District and currently serves as distinguished faculty and associate director of the educational doctoral program at Cal State University, Fullerton, where she directs the Leadership Institute for Tomorrow. To promote interfaith and multicultural understanding, Dr. Curry facilitates monthly spiritual dialogues via Zoom with expanded local and international participation. So thank you so much to our panelists for being here today. Grateful for your time here with us, and wanted to just kick this off with our first topic. So we have three topics today we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about COVID-19, the rise of racial and other hatred, and then community engagement. How can we get involved before opening it up for questions from panelists? But let's start with our first topic on COVID-19. And this is a question that I'm just going to ask to all of you. And I hope that we hear your responses and your perspectives, because I think it's so important. We're now in the second year of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has claimed the lives of so many and upended our society, our economy, and the basic way that we live. Since I've taken office, I've heard from so many people who've lost loved ones, who run small businesses that have been struggling either to pay their employees or just to even keep their doors open. I've heard from parents who are having trouble paying their mortgages or taking care of their kids, from countless numbers of workers who've become unemployed. These issues are affecting people from all walks of life, and obviously interfaith solidarity is a way to help unite these people in a time of great division. How has COVID-19 impacted your organization and its mission? What has the pandemic revealed about the importance of strengthening our community? So why don't we start this off in order? Reverend, let's see, I think our first panelist here was Dr. Steinberg, or Rabbi Steinberg.
Well, I'll take the promotion. Doctor's pretty nice too. So thanks, Senator, for having us. This is really an important conversation. COVID-19 has affected us in the most deep and profound ways possible. On the positive side, the need for spirituality and connection to one's faith community has grown exponentially. I never wanted to be an internet rabbi, but now that I have between Friday to Friday, 1,400 people viewing services at some point during the week makes me a very happy rabbi, which only indicates that there is a clear need for people to connect, particularly online. What I have noticed, though, Senator, is while it was traumatic to go into quarantine, I'm finding people coming out of quarantine are having a much tougher time. We've been taught to be afraid to be with each other, to touch each other, to hold each other, and to even see one another's smiles. And at the core of being a religious person is being in community. And so this struggle is not over yet. The other thing I would add, my two other community involvements is I'm a past chair and commissioner currently on OC Human Relations, and really involved in mental health here in Orange County. And it has brought out the COVID-19, the very worst of humanity I have seen, and also the very best of humanity. And on the mental health side in particular, I think we have another epidemic coming our way, and we better be ahead of it. And I say that to you as our government official, to be sure to fund every mental health initiative that comes your way, because the pain, suffering, depression, anxiety, I could go on and on, what has happened in this last 15, 16 months is going to have exponential effects over the next couple of years. So that's my quick take.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Could we move to Dr. Nawar?
I'll take the promotion too. I'm an academic librarian. I get called doctor a lot just being in academia, but appreciate your very kind introduction, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Just want to point out, just like Jasheed and Ding, in the Muslim culture or religion, we don't have clergies, we have imams. So I'm really here to represent myself as someone who belongs to the Muslim faith, but really more importantly as a human being and as an academic librarian at Chapman University. I fell in love with interfaith 10 years ago, and I never really looked back. I love representing myself as a Muslim woman, but also most importantly as someone who's very involved in the interfaith scene in Orange County. I think just like everybody else, whether religious or not, pretty much all institutions, religious, nonprofits, academic institutions, corporate organizations, I have to say adapted very, very, very well to COVID-19, as much as hard as it was, but for some reason the human beings were able to adapt. So just like the rabbi was mentioning, we started doing Friday prayers online. I'm very proud of all the mosques in Orange County and really across the world, embracing the Zoom and the Teams and Facebook Live. And I hate to say that we kind of got used to it. And then eventually when things got better, they started doing, like this last Ramadan, we had to register to go to Tarawih prayers. which actually was really nice. You know, you got a chance to actually, after a year into a pandemic, to go and pray next to everybody. You have to go and get your prayer mat, but a little bit of an inconvenience, but at least people actually appreciated it even more than before. So I'm really proud of all the religious institutions, whether Muslim institutions, you know, Christians, you know, Jewish institutions. Pretty much all the institutions were doing a very good job reaching out to their own communities, but really to other communities. I know I was invited to at least 10 or 15 interfaith meetings put together by pretty much all of the religious affiliations that I'm affiliated with. And I know I was attending a library conference last week, and one of the things that came up in that conference is that a lot of the practices that we developed during COVID, we're going to keep. Because we're finding out that there were a lot of people, especially in public libraries, right? I'm an academic librarian, but you know, in the public library scene, there were a lot of people that are maybe introverts or not comfortable going out, but they really enjoyed, you know, just attending those Zoom meetings from the convenience of their home. So as chair of the Arts, Exhibits, and Event Committee at Chapman University Libraries, I'm planning to have a Zoom link attached to every single event or exhibit that we host, because it's a convenience. And actually the outreach, I know we hosted an event last April, and we had people from all over the country attending our event. So to the rabbi's points, there were a lot of positive things that came out of this, especially, you know, the online version of events, reaching out to people, not having to drive all over, you know, to go to a meeting. I know a lot of our Interfaith Youth Council meetings were held in Zoom. As much as I like to hug my teammates and board members, but sometimes it's really hard to just be in that space. So I think that's something that I'm really proud to say that most institutions, religious or not, are going to continue to do that. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it was interesting times, and I'm glad to see that we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel, and people are starting to kind of get back after, you know, almost a year and a half.
Thank you, Ms. Noir. Appreciate that. And you know, none of us like to drive in traffic, and the traffic was really becoming unbearable before the pandemic in Orange County. And I guess I just say, you know, I've had a lot of conversations recently with faith leaders, with business leaders, and one of the things we've often discussed is which of the practices that we developed during COVID will stick and which will be blips in the road that disappear after COVID. So it's interesting to hear you and Rabbi Steinberg talk about you know, some of your experiences and your plans. Appreciate your remarks. Our next panelist, Pastor Ralph, if you could give your thoughts, would be eager to hear them.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. Of course, 2020 was a very trying year for both Core Church and Core CDC and our Community Development Corporation. Not having, you know, the ability to meet in person, and for none of our worship service, and, you know, especially in the African American community, we are people that love to gather, to fellowship, to socialize. And so we found ourselves not having our Bible studies, our prayer meetings, and the like. And so this proposed a challenge, you know, but it also proposed excellent opportunities to become creative with how we worship and engage with our membership and the community. It was easy in the beginning. It wasn't easy, I should say, in the beginning, because there was so much uncertainty with everything that was going on. And the only thing for certain was people were getting sick and people were dying. That seemed to be the only thing that was going on. And so, but yet everything we did, we had to figure out how to manage ourselves around it. Virtual Zoom meetings, Bible study, prayer meetings, online streaming, worship service. The internet and social media literally became our best friends. And so, and from that, as Rabbi Steinberg said, our church began to see the growth in its membership listening audience through the social media network. We found ourselves perfecting how we communicate through social media and online streaming. But did it provide challenges? Yeah, there was social disconnect, no intimacy. People were challenged with how to navigate their lives in this new context. It was new and strange to many of our members, and many of them, especially our elderly, felt disconnected and even abandoned. And so we had to deal with that. How do we go back and reach out to them when the church became the heart of and the center of their lives. And so we had to work upon dealing with that. And then with our Community Development Corporation, we provide so many social service programs to both the seniors and families in several residential apartments throughout the state and primarily in Orange County. And so our mission, as we were trying to impact communities of color with so many educational opportunities, financial literacy, and affordable housing, and through civic engagement, we found ourselves at a standstill. And so, but like everyone else, we had to shut down all of our in-person services, but we were able, what I like to say is, in the midst of COVID, to find commonality. And unfortunately, one of the things that really drove our communities together was the killing of George Floyd. We used that as a pivotal moment to bring unity into the community, to organize a peace march and a rally where we could show the community that we had more in common than we had that separated us. And out of that context, we were able to build our opportunities where we could sit and have dialogue and began to talk about some of the issues that were painting our community and deal with some of the racial, social biases that we had, implicit biases, in dealing with those kinds of conversations that some often become overlooked. And so we were able to partner with many of the faith leaders, those that are on here, and others in trying to deal with some of those issues. And even with President Cal from Cal State Fullerton, with Fran Fergie, he worked with us tirelessly in providing some of the educators from Cal State Fullerton to provide context to some of our discussion on race, racism, and dealing with some of the challenges on policing and whatnot. So yeah, this was a very challenging year, but yet we felt that there was an opportunities and we built upon that, and it showed that there was unity in the community. So in the same, on the same line what everyone else is saying, I believe that we have a platform that we can work from, an opportunity that we can build on. We know that we don't have to now just meet, but we have more opportunities through this social media platform to connect and make a difference in our communities.
Thank you, Pastor Ralph. Appreciate it. I also want to address one of the comments in the chat. This is not obviously an all-inclusive panel of all faiths in Orange County, and we know there are some major faiths that were not represented. This is, we tried our best and we'll continue to work. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is what we hope will be the first of many interfaith panels and discussions that we're going to have. And we do hope to include all of the faith communities here in Orange County that are willing to engage in this dialogue. So if you know of any faith communities that you think would be interested in participating, we would like to have them. And in this particular panel was not intentional, was not meant to be symbolic of anything. It is just, again, the first. And for what it's worth, my own faith community, the Episcopalian Church, is not represented here today, but I hope that they will take part in a future conversation as well. But again, we believe in inclusivity. We want to have this dialogue. And again, we're so blessed in Orange County to have a wide variety of faith communities. And I guess I should just add, I've been to Core AME, I've been to IUCC, I've been to many temples of different religions, and I hope to be at your faith community too. And I know that I and my staff would love to attend a faith service at your community. I think it's important symbolically for your representative in the state legislature to be there and stand side by side with you. So I will be delighted to accept any invitations to attend. Please don't hesitate to reach out to my staff. But with that, I wanted to give this same question around COVID-19 to Reverend Karen Stoyanov.
Thank you. As a Unitarian Universalist, by the way, I'm currently serving as the community minister for the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Fullerton. And so we went to Zoom for just about everything almost immediately. And I will tell you, it appeared like we did it seamlessly, but believe me, it was not seamless. There was a lot of work that needed to go into that. And that said, I want to tell you also that every night I say a little extra prayer for Zoom, because I think Zoom has made life livable. And I wonder what it was like during the Spanish flu epidemic when there was no media to speak of. And lots of people didn't even have telephones yet. But we're very fortunate. And in addition to the traditional things like having congregational services or meetings and committees, we did some things that have actually turned out to be wonderful. We used to have a movie group, and we'd all go out to dinner and then sit and discuss whatever the movie for the month was. Well, we transitioned to movies that you could see on one of the medias, and we gave up dinner because, well, you could have dinner if you wanted to at your own house, but it was a way to maintain some activity that went beyond business. Because I think one of the things I saw was people really struggling around not being able to get together with their friends, not being able to just be social, whatever that means for the individual. And so we maintain groups like our movie group that way. And something that I actually liked better than we were meeting in person, after our service, we have a coffee hour. If you know anything about Unitarians, you know that the most important thing they do is coffee hour. Excuse me. And so we started doing our coffee hour online. And there is a group of us who would not miss coffee hour for anything online, because it's the way we keep up with each other's lives. And I think as we're coming out, as a couple of you have said, we will still maintain that Zoom presence, because there are people who have said, I can come to church now. Before, I was having trouble because it was difficult to get there, or there were so many other things that were busy in their lives, and sometimes the extra time it took and the effort was really hard to build in. So even though I wish we hadn't had a pandemic, and I know all the awful things that have been part of it, there are almost always blessings for us. We just have to know how to access them.
Thank you for that very inspirational message, Reverend. Dr. Singh.
Thank you, Senator, for having us all here today. And really, I think that our community was affected very much in the same ways that others have already mentioned. Our community, our Sangat, as we call it, gets together at our Sikh place of worship, which is called a Gurdwara, for prayer, but certainly also for community building as well as socializing. And that was hard on everyone, including our elderly, I would say in particular. And we also, just as others have mentioned, found some virtual workarounds with some advantages of getting people engaged from other parts of the country, parts of the world that were really nice. So I think our experience was similar that way. I'd like to add one more, though, from the point of view of our specific community that I'm really proud of as a response to this whole pandemic. For those of you who don't know too much about the Sikh faith, I would say that, you know, the one theme that always comes up for us is social justice. It's a huge part of our belief system. And within that is a concept that we call seva, or really translated loosely, I think, becomes selfless service. And what that means, I think, is something that exists in most religious communities, the idea that you are to help your community without the idea of reward or maybe even acknowledgement. And the niche that our community has found in order to fulfill that mandate has been something called langar, which is to feed people, really. And so, historically, since the, beginning of our faith, we feed people. We feed people in our Sikh gurdwaras, regardless of background, regardless of whether they're there to worship for free. And so you can go to any Sikh gurdwara anywhere in the world and get a meal. And in times of crisis, the earthquake in Nepal or the tsunami or any of those other disasters, it's the Sikh community that provides hundreds and thousands of meals to people who are devastated all over the world. And that's, really become, as I said, our way of fulfilling that particular mandate. So with this COVID crisis, of course, our gurdwaras, just like all of these other houses of worship, were shut. And so people really felt, I think that aspect of seva was missing from their lives and wanted to be able to fulfill that even during the time of the pandemic. So what every, I think, Sikh Gurdwara around did, including the ones locally in Santa Ana, Buena Park, Riverside, is to start food pantries. And I think that all of us thought that there would be maybe some response, some need, and we were completely surprised by the amount of need that there was. So having volunteered at the pantry at the Santa Ana Gurdwara, I can tell you that on Saturday mornings, and we were doing this, we have been doing this every Saturday, there would be easily 1,000 cars lined up, starting at 6 a.m. to drive by and get their trunks filled with food from the food pantry. And I think, once again, this is not something that we're doing for kudos or acknowledgement. That's actually not part of the process at all. But we did realize that we were fulfilling a need in the community and were able to do it in a way that matched with our strengths and with our historical tradition. And I think that really has brought a lot of inspiration and a lot of comfort to the people within our own community for ourselves. And as another, sort of side benefit or silver lining blessing, as Reverend Karen was just saying, it's really mobilized our youth, which has been an incredible benefit. So I think every faith leader on this call would probably say that one of the challenges of the times is getting our youth engaged and involved in our religious practice and our religious community. And this kind of a hands-on activity, wow, did it inspire and mobilize our young people. They have been so actively engaged. They've been practically running the show, actually, as time has gone on. And so it has really revitalized that age demographic for us and really been another one of those blessings that Reverend Karen was just referring to.
Thank you so much, Dr. Singh. And I can attest, I was invited and honored to help volunteer at one of the Santa Ana Gurdwara's food drives. And the cars were lined up around the block. I mean, there were probably hundreds of them. And it was really amazing to see that generosity and all these volunteers who were there on a weekly basis to just help out. But with that, I wanted to move to Dr. Curry.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. And I want to thank Orange County Human Relations and the Senator's Office for hosting this event. Having an opportunity to share with each other is truly important. The question regarding to how has it impacted our communities, Baha'is, I think, first of all, before I even open my mouth, is talk about the Baha'is that, like others, we in the Baha'i faith do not have clergy. So not one single individual could represent the faith. So therefore, what I say today is not representative of our local community, national or international community, simply as a Baha'is own experience from myself. So that's the qualifier I want to state before. So for the Baha'is, like other community have been impacted by the pandemic, whenever there's 9 Baha'is in a city, it's formed as a formal community. So this model is a very distributed model. Each community already becoming very close-knit because it's by and large very small within its own city as a community has own administrative bodies. So I think this makes the mobilizing the community support much easier, and it points to the importance of how important it is on an everyday matter that we build strong communities, that the community is there for us to lean into with these strengths when crisis hits especially. And I think that we are tested by the strength and the structure of these communities. We have, like others, have pivoted to virtual, of course. Our 19-day feast and our Holy Day celebrations have all been held virtually and then continue. What is very interesting to point out, I think, besides what others have mentioned in terms of local support, is that we have cross communications and grouped as a result of this virtual connection from the pandemic impact. Many of the activities that used to be local are now at the national, regional, and international level. So for example, I have attended lectures, devotions, fireside chats that hosted by Baha'is in other countries and in other cities where I've never done that before. This is the very first time. So this pandemic has given the Baha'i community many more opportunities to actually learn from each other what we're doing worldwide in our own local communities. So I think this will continue after the pandemic. So the impact has been huge, but mostly on the positive side. I think Baha'is across the United States and worldwide have not stopped connecting with each other because of the pandemic. Perhaps I would say even a wider range of connection and different kind of connection and a different level of connection as well. So I think we have connected more from my own experiences, and then thanks to many different communications, the different ways that we organize our communication in the faith, the structures, and also like the previous speaker said, thanks to Zoom, that we had this wonderful platform to making people to people connect.
Thank you so much, Dr. Curry. Appreciate all the answers, hearing the variety of perspectives. I want to move on to our next topic, which is the rise of hate. And so through the last year plus, we've seen a rise in hate crimes, really over the last few years. We've seen hate against Muslims. We've seen a steady drumbeat of a rise in anti-Semitism. Anti-Black racism has reared its ugly head in a variety of ways, anti-Latino racism. And of course, in the last year, we've seen a fairly alarming rise in anti-Asian hate. This has been fueled by a lot of different reasons, a lot of racist rhetoric, scapegoating about the pandemic, and you know, of course, the history of this country. I'm sorry, but I've also missed Pastor Sarah, didn't I? Sarah Henderson, I totally missed you there. Pastor Sarah, please answer the COVID question, then we'll move on to the hate question. Are you there, Pastor Sarah? You're on mute, sir.
Is that better? Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay, great. I've reflected on the opportunity to think theologically different about our perspectives. So much of what you've all said I've completely agreed with and experienced, but I've enjoyed the opportunity to think back to our Christian origins as we began with as house churches. So we all went home to our own homes and did church. I did a lot of pastoral porch visits over the year. I read scripture in a new way, the Easter story or Pentecost, so many things I saw in a new perspective that I would not have gained had I not been in this situation. What was interesting for me was that I transitioned from my one church to a new church, and it was fortunate that I did stay in Orange County, in fact, still in the same interfaith council. But having to say goodbye to a congregation I served for so long was incredibly challenging. And so we went to, I think, an even greater intentional response in order to say goodbye and grieve the parting and also celebrate the ministry we shared. So then I began a new church during the pandemic, and almost all of my relationships have been formed online. And that's particularly interesting because who knew if this would work? And I think it has in many ways, although we're still watching that unfold. We're only just coming back to some in-person services. Like so many, we're trying to figure out how do we do both hybrid, to be in person and be authentic and real, just like we used to do in person so well, but also embrace online, which we've now learned how to do so well. But to do both of them at the same time is a new challenge. And we want to be very present to those folks who did decide to stay home and or maybe found us over the last year. We had so many people that would go on vacation and they'd be somewhere else, but just like Reverend Karen said, they'd be there for coffee hour. So we were able to relate to each other in a new way, and we want to be able to hold on to that. The other thing I was reflecting on, as so many of you have spoken, was really for me to return back to these, and I'm going to speak particularly as a Christian, our Christian values, because for us, Jesus tells us that the most important thing is to love our God, love ourselves, and love our neighbor. And so the golden rule is really what we always come back to. And in this particular year, we saw that heightened a polarization of what it meant to treat neighbor like neighbor. And I think that the pandemic gave us opportunity, and particularly to speak about the vaccine. In fact, how loving myself is getting a vaccine and loving my neighbor is getting the vaccine. And so to think about how do we really put our faith into action. This year gave us so many opportunities to reflect on how do we live out our faith, not just by going to sit in the pews, but by actually interacting with one another in the most loving way possible, which for much of the year meant staying away from each other, but to come up with creative ways to live out our faith, to serve one another, and to serve our community. So thank you. So sorry about my internet problem.
Thank you, Pastor Reverend Halverson Cano. So on the anti-hate question, that's our second question. And I just want to maybe gently state that we are almost 2/3 of the way through our time, and we're trying to get through another 2 questions, plus leave some time for audience questions at the end. So if we can kind of do this a little bit more tersely with kind of just your core thoughts here on this question, I would be grateful. And I know the audience would be grateful because they want to hear from you all. But really on this hate, we know we've seen the rise of hate. And so what are you doing to use your personal office, your agency to combat hate and find common ground? And what has your organization or faith group been doing? And do you find these effective? So let's start here with Dr. Curry.
Thank you very much for this very, very important question. And I really like the word personal agency. And then this personal agency is combating hate as Baha'is come from teachings of Baha'u'llah and the action we take in living the principles. So as a Baha'i, this is actually a very central teaching of the faith, and it's one of the key reasons I was attracted to become a Baha'i over 40 years ago, is the elimination of all forms of prejudice and racism, and the equality of men and women is central teaching of the faith. And this teaching didn't come from civil rights movement or feminism movement, and certainly didn't come from Rodney King or George Floyd. This fundamental teaching of the Baha'i faith came from Baha'u'llah. That was in the mid-1800s. And this isn't new either. I know the Zoroastrian faith talked about human rights. So we are reliving, renewing a message that is so important for our humankind in this era. I was taught by the Baha'i faith that America's most critical issue is race unity. And certainly, I think the evidence point that way, and it's still not only from the last century, this century, even right now. So the Baha'is have taken the teaching to heart and have led worldwide efforts in race unity. It's very important to us. Back in South Africa, for example, when the apartheid was in practice, the Baha'is did not segregate our worships. Here in the United States, we have always had integrated communities when segregation was the practice. And here in Huntington Beach, the Baha'is have taken leadership in holding the annual race unity events. So this is an important issue for Baha'is. And we have many, in fact, we have right now online anti-racism program going on with curriculum that could help us understand, identify, and dismantle racism. We have lots of programs and curriculum centrally for this anti-racism. I think I've enrolled in that program right now in anti-racism with daily discussions and lessons about how we can do in the individual level. So at the international level, the Baha'is have advocated for international policies and denouncements of religious oppression too, in addition to racial oppressions that's manifested in what we have seen in sociologists, you know, the 5 phases of oppression, that from marginalization or cultural imperialism, and of course, manifested in violence. So the Baha'i teaching channels these frustrations and pains and rage over human rights violations from hatred and prejudices with many opportunity for education.
Yeah, thank you. And that's, I really appreciate those insights. And I know that you have to leave after this, but really thank you for joining us. I'm sorry we didn't have more time for you.
Thank you.
Rabbi Steinberg.
Sure, thank you, Senator. I'll go very quickly. Not a week goes by where I don't get a phone call from a parent telling me that their child has suffered an anti-Semitic incident and or crime. What I know from my work on the OC Human Relations Commission is that hate incidents and crime are terribly, terribly underreported and therefore terribly, terribly underfunded. I cannot speak louder to our politicians on the local level and on the state level. We need more money to get this reported so that we can address it from a proactive way instead of always the reactive way. It is the wrong way to go. The last thing I will say is this. You're preaching to the choir here. 4 people on this screen have spoken at my temple. Everyone on this screen, I think after Pittsburgh, we did a rally at Temple, and I sent out a tweet at 2 o'clock for a 7 o'clock rally. Everyone on this screen showed up to support us. It is the places in Orange County in particular that, and we unfortunately have a terrible history in Orange County of being a bedrock of hate. We need to get into those spaces. We need to find ways to preach not just to the choir, but to the others who, because they are working from ignorance, need to be educated. And I don't have the answer, by the way, but I would love to brainstorm with the choir who sits here on how to get to the rest of the congregation, if you will, so that they can hear our music. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Steinberg. And I should say, for the record, we have pushed for funding for ethnic studies, for anti-bias training, for hate reporting and crimes. So we're hoping that there will be several $100 million in this budget that we're going to see this weekend.
I love that. Just for the record, ethnic studies provides its own controversy in and of itself with respect to hate. So
sure. Well, and also Holocaust training and education. And I think these are all embedded in part of that. But we're looking to essentially teach the history of this country, warts and all. And I think that's part of the goal. And so not only this country, but of our world. And I know I've supported Senator Scott Wiener in his efforts to try to ensure that people don't forget the Holocaust during this time.
Amen. Thank you so much, Senator.
So Ms. Noir, I will not give you that doctoral title. I'm going to take that back. But Ms. Noir, if you could answer.
All right. Sure. Yeah. And really quickly, because it's really a very broad and a question that I've been really passionate about answering for the past 10 plus years since I got involved in all these initiatives, you know, diversity, interfaith, and all that stuff. And I have so many hats to wear, right? Like one, as an employee is at Chapman University, and I'm really proud to say that Chapman University have done a ton of work as a university to anti-hate, diversity, equity, and inclusion, ethnic studies summits and minors, everything. We have a Holocaust libraries. We're celebrating Pride Month. I just co-curated an exhibit, a virtual exhibit, to support the LGBT community. So everything you can imagine has been done at the university level. We just also announced the recruitment and the employment of a new vice president for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm the leader of the diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives at the libraries, and I'm proud to say that I've pretty much curated an exhibit or an event that has something to do with every single religion representing today, whether it's the Sequence events, Vaisakhi events, Jewish event that I co-curated 10 years ago, when somebody looked at me and said, "Oh my goodness, a Muslim woman curating a Jewish exhibit at a university established by the the Disciples of Christ," and they were like, "Wow, this doesn't make any sense," but it really does. So that's at the university and the library level. But at the personal level, whether through the local mosque that I go to, I know they've been hosting open mosques, participating in anti-hate panels, opening their doors to the community, local, national, and international levels. But really personally, and I know some of my friends here know about my initiative called Change the Narrative. It's a hashtag that I started 10 years ago. And since then, I've been speaking all over the world, I would say, about it really starts by just one person at a time. Is it working or not? I was having a really casual conversation with Dr. Singh last weekend. We do feel that it's working. I know it's not magic, and I know it's not a rosy picture, but we do feel that there is a change. It's one person at a time. And I gave a TED Talk in 2015. And since then, I've spoken at churches, at mosques, at temples, at Sikh gurdwaras, anywhere I get invited to speak about changing that narrative. And I never spoke as a Muslim chaplain or a Muslim scholar. I speak as myself. I share about my personal story. My son is going into the United States Air Force Academy, for example, and everybody was looking at me like, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yes, we are Americans." And I think the more we change that narrative, and people see people from all representations just being themselves, participating and being really good citizens, that narrative is going to change. That's really my 2 cents.
Thank you so much. Pastor Ralph.
Yes, one of two thoughts that I would like to bring. First of all, open, honest discussions from those who are willing to sit and talk about racial reconciliation from a faith perspective. And then we have to get beyond being comfortable. We have to be uncomfortable, okay? And we have to push the pencil where there's honest dialogue. We must have also, I believe, a community oversight board that does not dictate, but review and give directions on policies and practices, that is designed to provide transparency and deal with sensitive policies as it pertains to racial disparities and an effective response to the needs of the residents in our communities. And so if we are not sitting at the table and coming up with solutions and educating people, and as Rabbi Steinberg said, putting funding dollars into the conversation that address the issue so that we can have people in place that are actually empowered to make a change.
Thank you for that. I agree. Reverend Stoyanov.
I could just say what he said, Reverend Ralph. Unitarian Universalists know and understand that they are expected to be out there working for justice, not just saying I believe in justice, but doing something. And I believe that the best thing we can do is get to know each other, talk to each other. And so I got to give a plug to Orange County Human Relations.
Yes.
I'm a board member, so I'm slightly biased, but not slightly, very biased. But at any rate, they hold dialogues in which they ask those uncomfortable questions. And people who have mixed backgrounds get to hear each other answer. And I have learned so much, including the terrible mistakes I've made, not intentionally, but accidentally. And I always say I don't make the same mistake twice. I managed to come up with something else. But at any rate, look on Orange County Human Relations, and when the next dialogue comes up, sign up for it. It's a life-changing experience, and it'll help with the business of hate. Get rid of it.
Thank you, Reverend. And speaking of OC Human Relations, we do have Gagandeep here to answer this question on behalf of Orange County Human Relations. This is obviously a big topic, hate. So Gagandeep, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this in your role as a representative of OCHR.
Yes, thank you, Senator Min. You know, for coming here on behalf of Orange County Human Relations, specifically being the Human Relations Specialist and on the Bridges Schools program, this is something that's really important for us to be talking about. Specifically because our students are getting affected by this with anti-Asian hate, anti-Semitism, xenophobia. These are things that are just going, there's no end in sight when you're seeing some of these stats. I did share the link to our hate crimes report. What Orange County Human Relations is really trying to strive for, and our mission has always been to foster this mutual understanding amongst residents, to really eliminate this prejudice and intolerance and discrimination in Orange County, to make this space a safe space for all folks. And this is something we're doing together. We're doing this with our faith leaders. We're doing this with our civic leaders. But it's something that is it's a very hard topic to discuss. And sometimes reporting hate crimes is easier than actually reporting hate incidents. And these are two different things that we think it could be the same, but hate incidents are very underreported. And they're the small things. They're those things that we don't always, it's sort of the afterthought that we're like, that seemed like something was off, that my boss approached me in a certain way, or there's those little things. So I encourage you all to see our website and like because we really lay out what a hate crime looks like according to sort of, we have the terms that we use at OC Human Relations, but also the terms that California has for what is reported as a hate incident and a hate crime. One of the things that we've done here at OC Human Relations is really create our campaign, our Hate Free OC campaign, and we encourage you to take the pledge. We've been working the last 20 years to really creating implicit bias trainings, as well as trainings on the history of civil rights in Orange County, to really be aware of the land that we're living on, and the places we work. I mean, this land that we live, work, and play on is the traditional territories of the Tongva and Achaman tribe, and these people. So the history of anti-hate and bigotry, it's part of our history, and it really takes our civic leaders, our faith leaders who are in this community to speak up on these issues and incidents. So we continue to work with all of you here to make sure that these things are being accounted for, because if we don't know what's going on, it gets harder and harder to tackle these issues. So I thank you for letting us have this space to address this and work with our leaders.
Thank you, Gagandeep. We appreciate it. Reverend Dr. Halverson Cano.
I just would echo what everyone else has said. As a white woman that serves a largely white congregation, the previous congregation I served the same, we are tasked with figuring out how can we be supportive, how do we do this work. One of my members here, who you all know, Felicity Figueroa, I think she's Orange County's greatest activist, talks about a program called My Work to Do. We recognize that we have work to do. This is layered, and I think that we need to really look at that and look at our part, and also recognize that this is a very sensitive topic, and that we each have to come at that, and we do, as Reverend Karen said, we make mistakes. We look at the little microaggressions that we have committed, or macroaggressions, as a matter of fact. So, I'm on this journey, and I really am here to support and want to recognize the place that I sit in, and the role that I play as a leader, but I also want to let others lead in this particular topic.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And then we have Dr. Singh.
Yeah, everyone has already said it so well. It really is about education, awareness, and dialogue. And so that's why, Senator, we so appreciate this particular forum. The only thing really I'll add to what my colleagues have already said is that I think there's also a role for interfaith solidarity in all of this, and in how powerful that can be. Just as an example, I'm proud of our own community that after 9/11, when there was a lot of anti-Muslim sentiment, our community, were distinguished by wearing turbans. The men have beards. And there has always been a lot of assumption that many people in our community are actually Muslim. And we actively, as a community, decided that we would not, when we were encountering any kind of vitriol, that we would not say, oh, we're not Muslims. Oh, the mosque is down the street, kind of a thing. That we would combat that as a joint community with our Muslim brothers and sisters. And I think that can be really powerful. And it comes naturally, I think, to our Sikh community, because in addition to all of the equalities that I think every community espouses in all our faiths, equality of background, socioeconomic strata, gender, race, all of those things, we also believe very strongly in equality of religion, and that our religion doesn't have any moral superiority over any others. And in fact, our founding spiritual leader, Guru Nanak, said that all religions are like the spokes of a wheel. They will all lead you to that same central truth if you practice them correctly. And so, I think that feeling that we have respect for all of the community members who are members of other faiths is really important, not just tolerance, but actual respect for people of other religious communities is really important. And I think that that's one of the things that I've so enjoyed about my work with the Orange County Interfaith Network, is that we do have that real interfaith solidarity. And when one community leader speaks up for another community, it is really, really powerful. And I thank all of my colleagues on this call for doing that so many times.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. And I guess just to chime in myself on this topic, I want to pick up on something that Rabbi Steinberg mentioned, which is that this can sometimes feel like an echo chamber, that you often see the same interfaith leaders out there in the same spaces, and there's not enough engagement. But I might just add on to what Dr. Steinberg said. I think there's always going to be the challenge of appealing to those who hate and preach hate. And that is an ongoing battle we have. But I think in the short term, a equally important challenge is reaching out to those who are silent about this hate, which is, I believe, and I this is anecdotal data, but I've talked to a lot of people out there, and I very strongly believe that the vast, vast majority of Orange County residents believe in our values, values that you all are expressing here so eloquently today, but they are often silent. It's not their business. They don't need to get involved. And so something happens on the street, they kind of ignore it or look the other way. Something happens to their neighbor, they ignore it and look the other way. And too often we see that phenomenon. I think at least in the short term, what we need to do is get those people to speak up, because what we are seeing right now, in my view, in a political perch, is that it has become acceptable to commit public acts and incidents of hate. And I want to pick up here on something that was stated by, I'm forgetting who said it. I think, is Gagandeep, that there's a difference between hate crimes and hate incidents. And, what used to be socially unacceptable has now become acceptable. And not all these rise to the level of a crime, but someone coming up to someone's space, getting into their personal space, screaming a racial epithet at them, intimidating them, expressing some openly racist or hateful sentiment. Those things did not used to be tolerated in public. People said those things quietly, but there was kind of a general sense of ostracism around voicing or acting on those viewpoints publicly. And for whatever reason, whether it's the past president's public statements, whether it's just the general rise of hate or media coverage of that, I have seen and heard about so many incidents where people, like literally thousands in Orange County, if not more, where people have kind of violated that social compact. And I think we need to make sure as a community that at the very least in the short term, we make it clear that that is not acceptable behavior, that is not a majoritarian view. Because I think a lot of these folks who express and act in these ways do think they're representing the majority. And I think that's the short-term challenge. The long-term challenge is actually trying to change hearts and minds. And there, I think interfaith dialogue is going to be so important. But I guess I'd say in the short term, to kind of pick up on the old adage, if you see something, say something. And I think that has to be the mantra that we get out there to our communities, and that we need to stand together, and this has to be an intersectional effort. If something happens to Black people, that is an act against all of us. If something happens to Jewish people, that is an act against all of us, and we need to stand together, and that is certainly the message that I have been preaching. But with that, let's move on to our last question, and we're down to just like 10 minutes, so I'm going to give you each 1 minute, and I'm going to get the hard stop here, so if you hear me cough really loudly, that's kind of my warning for you. Community engagement is going to be so important, not just for COVID, not just for hate, but going forward to kind of build bridges among our shared values between our faith communities. Is there anything your faith organization or that you in your role can suggest or engage as far as community building towards unity? And if there's one thing that your organization can suggest for us to embark on a positive pathway towards change, what would that be? And here I want to start, let's go to the middle here. Reverend Stoyanov, let's start with you here.
Well, I think the most succinct thing I can say is interfaith work, and we need to talk to each other and work together on community things.
Wow, that is less than a minute. Thank you very much. Appreciate that, and those are sage words. Reverend Dr. Sarah Halverson-Cano.
I think as we look at a post-religious world, we need to think about how can we be relevant. And this is it. It's our opportunities to work together, to work for the common good, to tap into all of our faith commandment, to seek justice, to love kindness and walk humbly, as the prophet Micah says, and that by modeling this and doing it together, we can be relevant. Otherwise, I see that there's not a whole lot of hope for religion or even for the future of our decency of society if we don't do this hard work, reach out beyond ourselves, and remain relevant by sharing the good news, as we Christians would say, the good news of a world where each human is seen as a dignified person with respect and love, the right to work and be paid fairly, the right to live without being discriminated against. This is our job, and for us religious folks to remain relevant, we need to be preaching this beyond the choir, as Rabbi Rick would say.
Thank you very much, Reverend. Rabbi Steinberg.
Two very quick stories. The first one is our synagogue was under construction 4 years ago, and so we were having Sabbath services at the Mormon church. And I invited the Roman Catholic priest to speak. Only in America could a Jewish congregation have a Sabbath service in a Mormon church where the Roman Catholic was speaking, and it was really fantastic. The other thing I would say is the best thing we can do as leaders is try to help our own people reduce their anxiety and hate. After October event in Pittsburgh 3 years ago, 3 Muslim men came to our front door. This is the day after. And the secretary called me and said, Rabbi, there's 3 men at our door. And we were nervous. So I opened the door very slightly because I had all these biases in my blood at that time. And the 3 men said to us, we are so sorry what happened to you. We would like to stand guard during your next Sabbath service, if that would be okay with you. And it taught me a really important lesson that people of goodwill will come to help one another. And that I had a responsibility to tell my people, just because you see someone different than you, even if someone from their own religion was not good to our faith, that doesn't mean all of them are not good to our faith or to our people. And it taught me such an important lesson that I have to teach my own people to be tolerant as well.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Steinberg. Dr. Singh.
Well, I'm going to just be brief, but answer from my other hat as a pediatrician. I really do think that we need to get our kids engaged and our youth engaged in all good works, including the good work of our faiths. And one of the ways I think that we can do that is by concentrating on the common good. I find that when I talk to younger people, their perception now of religion is that most of it is just engaged in recruiting new members. It's less about doing community service or common good. And they can't relate to that. They also, they feel that, that perception of being a person of faith is also connotates to them in some ways being conservative, and then further on somehow even maybe being intolerant, that people of faith are, sort of in those mindsets. And so I think that if we can get back with our interfaith work and working in solidarity towards the common good, we can re-engage our youth and really have our work pushed forward for future generations.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Singh. Ms. Noir?
Yeah, and yay to the youth, Jasjeet. I think that's great. I know you've been passionate about youth for years and years. So two things. I think the one and the most important thing that I want to say today is authentic and organic diversity. I think diversity has been a buzzword for the last few years. And I think we want to just keep focusing on make it as organic and authentic as possible. We just don't want to just check the marks and make ourselves feel good in institutions and organizations. So as the more we're authentic in the work we're doing when it comes to diversity and supporting people of color or minorities, the better, all this work is going to come to fruition. My second thought would be, making sure that we're not preaching to the choir. And I know Rabbi Steinberg said that before. And I'm really excited to see that this interfaith event is put together by a politician like yourself, seriously, because I know like most of us here have served as panelists or speakers at interfaith events that were hosted by local interfaith chapters. And you pretty much go and like, oh, I know all of you. So you're preaching to the choir. At least, I'm looking at the attendees, I'm looking at some of the participants today. Some of you I've never met before. So it makes me feel good. The fact that our politicians, the local ones, and hopefully on the national and international level are actually interested in these kind of conversations. That's something that we should definitely keep pushing in a post-COVID world, common good, interfaith dialogue, and hopefully, on the international level as well.
Thank you so much, Ms. Moore. And Pastor Ralph.
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Yeah, three things I want to just pick up on. And one is, as often as possible, we must stand together. As often as possible. We can't afford to show when there is injustice being served against any one race that we are not standing together to support that individual race or person that is being afflicted by the racial biases that they may receive. The second thing is we need to speak in unity and harmony. And the way we stand and speak is to have the same message. When something happens in the Jewish community or in the Muslim community, a message must be communicated through our collective organization that this is the message for the day when we stand in our various formats, in our pulpits, before our congregation, that we're speaking the same message of concern that really prick the heart and minds of our people. The third thing I would like to say is we have to practice what we preach. We can no longer just sit around and have conversations and not put our conversation into action. And so if we believe it, then we have to stand march until we can see change take place and make a difference in the lives of those individuals that depend on us as community leaders and faith leaders that represent them in the various formats in which they live.
Thank you so much for that, Ralph. And I want to thank all the panelists. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time for questions, but if you have any you want to post in the chat, I'm sure there will be people, our panelists would love to reach out. But I want to hand it over to Gagandeep to close. And thank you so much to Gagandeep and OC Human Relations for helping us put together this panel. I thought it was a very robust dialogue, and I hope to continue this dialogue with you and with other faith leaders in the community, because I do think we live in perilous times right now, and a lot of the social fabric is fraying. A lot of the bonds of trust and society and community that I grew up with, that we all were blessed to grow up with, are really fraying. And I think it's up to us collectively in government, in a religion, in our community, to work together to build that bond between humanity. So I want to thank you for all you do, and also for taking part in this conversation today. Gagandeep, thank you.
Thank you, Senator David Min, and our faith leaders. On behalf of OC Human Relations, we want to thank everyone for attending this series of Finding Common Ground, a conversation with faith leaders. We want to continue to have these conversations, so we encourage you to please reach out, whether it's our website or Senator David Min's website, to get more of your feedback on how we can continue to have these conversations. And more importantly, to continue to celebrate the richness and diversity that is Orange County. I know that it is together that we're going to make this city, this community, this county, a place that is safe for all. And with that, I just want to thank you all again, and thank you for letting us have your Saturday. And we wish you nothing but love and light.
Peace.